A while back I posted a video on how you could create your own custom images and use those when deploying session hosts for Azure Virtual Desktop. And that is not a too complicated of a process, but the method I showed in that video is a very manual one, and also it's pretty old school to create images in that way. That the method is a very manual one also means that it will be prone to human errors, because we humans tend to make mistakes and forget things, unfortunately. And there are ways to automate the entire image creation process, for example using pipelines and Packer or using the Azure Image Builder. But while those are really cool and useful, it does require you to familiarize yourself with those tools, and you need to be comfortable with working with code. If you want a simpler way, or just prefer doing it all in the portal, you do have a way that is specifically tailored towards Azure Virtual Desktop. It's actually built upon the Azure Image Builder, but it is made to be used right there in the Azure portal. It is called Custom Image Templates, and it is indeed the topic of today's video. I'll show you the steps involved in creating custom images through the Custom Image Templates service. And along the way, I'll tell you more about this service, how it works and how it could also work as the first step in never patching your session hosts again. Sound good? Cool! So for today's demo part, I have prepared some bits, and some bits I'll do live as we go through this. Seeing as the process of actually building the image does take quite a while, I have already done that once, and we'll use that image when deploying session hosts later on, but the steps taken are precisely the same ones. I have also prepared a basic setup with AVD, so we can just add some session hosts later on. The setup is basically just a VNet, Bastion, and a NAT gateway. And if you didn't watch my video on NAT gateway, the link is up in the corner and in the description. It will be a necessity when we get to September next year, so going forward I'll always be using that or some other way to provide outbound access to my Azure environments. Anyway, if you want to, you can check my basic setup and the bicep files for it over on GitHub. Link again is in the description. Alright, let's get the prerequisites for custom image templates taken care of. The prerequisites for custom image templates are 6 specific resource providers: the desktop virtualization, the virtual machine images, storage, compute, network, and key vault. You need a resource group to store your custom image templates and images in. You need a user-assigned managed identity and a custom role to assign to that managed identity. There is also 2 optional prerequisites: an Azure Compute Gallery to store your images in, and a VNet to be used during the building process. I do have a script that will take care of these prerequisites over on my GitHub, so you can check that out, and if you want to. And in that way, get your lab quickly running, up and running. But for the sake of this video, let us do it manually. So let us begin with the resource providers. These are per subscription. So I'll go into my subscription and then down to the resource providers. And first, let us check the first one. That will be the desktop virtualization. As you can see, in my case, it is already registered for my subscription, but if it wasn't, then you'd simply select it and then click register. I have had occasions in the past where this would say registered, but I'd still get error message stating that the resource provider isn't registered. In those cases, usually the solution is to simply re-register resource providers simply by selecting it and clicking this button right here. All right, now to verify the rest of these resource providers, the process is similar, so let's just speed through this. Alrighty, all good. The next prereq is that we have a resource group, and I already have created one, so that is good. Next would be the user assigned managed identity. So from my resource group here, I'd click create. Then I'd search just for a managed identity. And then on user assigned managed identity, click create and user assigned managed identity. Give it a pretty name like managed ID. Perfect. Review and create. Then hit create. Alrighty, next on the list of prereqs is a custom role that we can assign to this managed identity. And in my case, I only want this custom role to be assignable to my one resource group. So I'll go back to my resource group, and from this resource group, I'll go to access control. Then I'll hit add and add custom role. I'll give it a fitting name, like for example, custom image templates. And from here, I'll go a bit not so logical, I guess. I'll select start from JSON, and then I'll jump to the JSON tab here. And then I want to go to the documentation for this. The link is of course in the description. And I'll copy this JSON list over here. Go back to the portal and then hit edit. And within the actions here, I will paste the permissions that I copied from the documentation. Then I'll just hit save. I just find this way of doing it a bit easier than either selecting the permissions from the list or even writing the entire JSON myself. But if I now go back to the permissions tab, you can see that the list here is populated with a couple of permissions, and it's all of the permissions required for our custom role. Now, in a production environment, you would probably go to the assignable scopes here and change that to match your management groups or subscriptions. But like I said, for my setup now, I only need this role to be assignable to this one resource group. So we'll just go to review and create, and then create. Hit OK. And now we need to, add that custom role to, or assign this role to my user assigned managed identity. So hit add and then add role assignments. And I'll search for my custom image templates role. Then go to members, and I'll select the managed identity here and then select members. This will be a user assigned managed identity, and I can find my managed ID here. Click on it and then click select, and then review and assign, and then review assign yet again to assign that custom role to my managed identity. Now that was actually all of the required prerequisites, but we do have those two optional ones. One of which I would like to set up, and that would be the Azure Compute Gallery to store our images in. The reason this is an optional prerequisite is that the custom image templates feature can either store your produced images in as managed images or put the images in Azure Compute Gallery, or both. And of those, I do prefer to have it in a gallery so that we have a proper versioning and that kind of stuff. The other optional prerequisite would be a VNet to be used when building images, which will be useful if you need to have access to some of your existing resources while building the images. For example, a file share with installers on or something like that. But in my case, that is not needed, but I do want that Azure Compute Gallery. So from the overview of my resource group, I'll hit create, and then I'll search for gallery. And then on the Azure Compute Gallery, I'll hit create and Azure Compute Gallery. Give this a name of demo gallery. And that is actually all that we are required to set up here. So hit review and create. And then create. Now in a production environment, you might really want to go through all of the sharing settings and stuff like that. But again, this is a lab environment, so I don't really care about all of that as of yet. And then we actually need to wait for this deployment because once it's done, we need to go in and add a VM image definition. So I'll hit go to resource since this is now done deploying. And from our gallery, we'll hit add an VM image definition. And this VM definition should be called demo image, I guess. OS type will be Windows because that's what we're going to be deploying. And here on the security type, you already here need to make a informed decision on what kind of session host you will be deploying later on. Because if you select standard here, then you cannot deploy trusted launch session hosts later on, or confidential machines for that matter. Safest bet is probably to go in and select the trusted launch supported, because that will allow you to deploy both standard and trusted launch. It does not, however, allow you to deploy confidential session hosts. Also worth noting that selecting anything but standard here will remove the option to create Gen 1 VMs. So if you are required to use Gen 1 VMs, then make sure to select the standard. In my case, I'll select the trusted launch supported for now. So I'll have both the option of doing security type standard on my session host and the security type of trusted launch. I do not have a need for Gen 1, so that is fine that we do not have the option there. Further down, we have the OS states, which needs to be generalized with custom image templates. Lucky for us that is the default selection. The last things here is the publisher, offer, and SKU. These are really all up to you, but if you will be dealing with a lot of templates, you should probably have a proper naming convention for these. Just a bit of a heads up there. In my case, I'll just input PetterTech. The offer would be image, and the SKU will be 01. The rest of the settings here are not needed as of now, so I'll go ahead and click review and create, and then create. In a production environment, you might want to carefully go through the other settings, but as they are not a requirement, I simply skip them for now. This is, after all, just a lab setup. After all that, we now have successfully completed all of the prerequisites for custom image templates. The setup in this resource group now is pretty much the exact same as you would end up if you simply ran the script that I mentioned earlier. Just download it off my demo stuff repo and run it with the name of the resource group like this, and that should yield you pretty much all you need and have the exact same kind of setup as I do have here now. Now for the more exciting part, the custom image templates part. Because now that we've all of our prereqs taken care of, we can head on over to Azure Virtual Desktop. And down on the left side here, you'll find custom image templates. And like I mentioned, I have created one earlier, so you will see this one listed here. But let us create a new one and click Add Custom Image Templates. We'll just call this Custom Image Templates. And since I already have one created, it will automatically select the yes on the question if you want to import from existing template. So I'll set that to no, since we want to create a brand spanking new one. Then make sure that subscription and resource group are all selected correctly, and also location. That would be for me today North Europe. And then on the managed identity, select the one that we created earlier on. If you used my script, that would be a managed identity called custom image template identity. So hit next on our source image here. I highly recommend that you always use the platform images, or an image from the marketplace. They are listed as platform images there. The reason for that is that those images are actively maintained by Microsoft, so they will actually be patched each month. So basing your image off of one of those will save you some time, since you don't have to immediately start patching your images or the session hosts you create from that image. And as you can see, you can also choose to select either a managed image as a source or selecting one from the Azure Compute Gallery, so you can also base stuff off of your own images. But like I said, go with platform images if you can. and I will do so. And I'll select the Windows 11 Enterprise Multi-Session 23H2 Gen 2. Because as you remember, we need to use a Gen 2 source image. Next. And then here we select the where we want those images to end up. Like I mentioned earlier, you can opt for the destination being a managed image, an Azure Compute Gallery, or both. The simplest way here is to use a managed image, and that is also why the Compute Gallery is an optional prerequisite. I do, however, prefer to use Compute Galleries since they provide us with a lot better versioning on our images. So I'll check the Azure Compute Gallery here, select my demo gallery and the definition that we created. And for gallery image version here, we need to input a version number with 3 segments. So for now, I'll just go with 1.0.0. The run output name here is something you will rarely have a use for. But if you end up in a situation where you need to troubleshoot the image building process itself, then you will need that name to locate the logs for that building process. So choose something that makes sense, like output dash and then the name of your custom image template, for example. In my case, I'll go with the ever created name of output. Replication regions is just to which regions your image should be replicated. I suggest you select all regions that you will be creating session hosts in based on this image. You know, for speed reasons, so that when you deploy a session host in the US, it doesn't pull the image from Europe, for example. The exclude from latest question here is a curious one. You might have noticed when you are deploying VMs in Azure that you often can select an image and then the version of that image, or just latest. Latest is great for those cases where you regularly create new versions of images and don't want to have to update the deployment process with the new image every time. But the standard selection here is that this new version should be excluded from the latest, meaning that if your deployment process is set to use the latest, then this new version would not be used since it is excluded from latest. So I'll change that to no in my case. The storage account type will give you the standard choices of either LRS, locally redundant storage, or ZRS, zone redundant storage. If you don't recall the difference between those, then I have a video on that. Link is up in the corner in the description. And by the way, like and subscribe, will you? Cool. And then I'll just hit next here since LRS it's perfectly fine for me in this case. Now on the build properties here, choose rather carefully. First of all, the build timeout here. This is the length of time that the image creation process can take before it times out and fails. Selecting a too short of a timeout will perhaps not allow for the image to be created successfully since things tend to take some time. Selecting the max can also be bad, or at least painful if you're impatient. Say for example, the image creation process is hanging on something. It can then spend up to 960 minutes or 16 hours before timing out and failing. That is a long time. In my experience, the build process usually takes around 1.5 hours for a pretty standard build without too much customization. So the default of 240 minutes here can actually also be a bit too much, especially if you're testing out new stuff and don't want to wait around. But it also depends on the next selection here. By the way, I'll just leave it on default 240 now. The next selection here is the size of the VM that the image building process will take place on. And I recommend you not being a cheapskate here. Just go big. The VM will not live longer than, at max, the build timeout you specify. And the bigger the VM, the faster the build process will complete, usually. So I tend to click see all sizes. And I'll find the latest version of the D series and let's see, let's go for a D16S. That's probably fine. So that's the size, and now we have the OS disk size. I recommend you do not alter the OS disk size unless you have to go bigger. Now, the build process will have to create a few temporary resources, things like the VM that it will build the image of, a storage account, a key vault, and so on. And the staging group here is the name of a resource group that houses all of those temporary resources. It is optional. If you do not specify anything, then a semi-random name will be generated based on the name of the resource group where the custom image templates resides. It would also be prefixed with IT underscore, so it will probably stick out like a sore thumb. And specify a name if that is not your thing. Another reason why one would specify a name here is if you, for example, have an Azure policy that enforces a specific name structure on resource groups, because that semi-random name will probably go against that policy and then the build process will fail. So yeah, select one if you need to, and in my case I won't, so the next one here is actually also optional, and that is the VNet. Here is the reason why a VNet was an optional prerequisite. You can choose to leave this field empty, and that will make the image building process create a temporary VNet for you. Again, you might have Azure policies in place that will hinder this. In those cases, create a VNet and specify it here. Another reason to specify a VNet would be that if you at some point in the image building process will have a script or something that needs to pull stuff off from existing infrastructure, like a file share. In my simple lab setup, that is not a worry, not the resource group and not the VNet. So I will leave those both empty. Now, it's the fun part, the customizations. And this is where the custom image template service actually gets very useful. Because this is everything custom that you want in your image. And there's a ton of built-in stuff here. Let's click the add built-in script and we'll see. We're not going to go through all of these, but let's do some highlights. At the bottom, you have the apply Windows updates. And there should really not be any if you base your image off of the marketplace images. Like I said, those are maintained, but it doesn't hurt to check this box anyway. And if you base your images off your own images, those are probably not patched every month, so this little checkbox would be neat in that case. You can also add or remove Office applications, so if you want to, add the Visio or project application or remove the Access application, you can do so simply by selecting it here. You can remove Apex packages, so if you don't want your session hosts to all have the Clipchamp application, then you simply remove it this way. You also have here like session timeouts, screen capture protection, RDP short path, and so on and so on. In my case now, I will do something that is immediately visible. So I'll set the default OS language and I'll install that language. So ticking both of these boxes and then selecting Norwegian, and that should yield us an image that has the default OS language of Norwegian. So select those and then hit save. But that is only the built-in ones. You can also add your own customizations or your own scripts here. So if I click add your own script here, and just for demo purposes, I'll do one that installs PowerShell. So install PowerShell. And then I'll head on over to my GitHub page and grab a script that I made a while back on a live stream over on twitch.tv/PetterTech. Link to the script is in the description. But just keep in mind that if you want to use your own scripts here, the links needs to point to the raw version of those files. So I'll just grab this, then go back and paste this as a URI. And as you can see, you can also add in reboots after running your scripts if you need to. And then I'll hit save. And the fun thing here is that you can also see the links to all of those built-in scripts as well as your own built-in script. So if you want to take a look at those scripts, you can actually head on over to GitHub and take a look at them because they're all public, which is kind of cool. After adding all of my customizations, I can hit next. And tags I'll skip for now, so we'll hit next again. And then I have the summary of my custom image template. And I'll go ahead and click create here. And this process, well, at least for now, it does have a bit of a delay on it. So the new custom image template isn't immediately visible in this page. So in my experience, it only takes a few minutes, and then you can start hitting that refresh button like a maniac. And here you see we have our new custom image templates. It is in the status of creating, so let us give it a few moments more. All right, the template is now created. It is in a success state. That means that we can now go ahead and build images off of our custom image template. So if I checkmark this custom image templates, I can do start build. And this will start the build process of this image. It will initiate the creation of the resource group, the staging resource group, the VM, the storage account, and all of that. And the neat thing is they can actually watch this in action. So you have the link to your staging resource group all over here. And as I said, it is prefixed with IT underscore and then name of your resource group. As you can see, currently there's only a storage account here, but if we refresh, we will probably at some point soon see a couple more resources. So now we have our key vault, and this will go on and create all the VMs and the virtual network card and so on and so on. And when the image building process is complete, it will remove everything in this resource except for the storage account. And the reason for that is that the storage account will still house the logs from the image building process. So if you need to go back and do some troubleshooting or find out why something happened in the image building process, then that storage account is where you will find the logs for that. Now, if we go back to our custom image templates, this and refresh, of course, you'll see that the image build process is running. And like I said initially, this is a process that does take a while. In my experience, the same thing that we did here will take about 1.5 hours, and we're not going to be sitting around waiting for that. So what we'll do now is to go ahead and create some new session hosts based on an image that I created using the exact same stages. It's actually the image that was the result of this CIT01 here. So in my case, I already have a host pool and all that set up. So I'll go to host pools, HP01, and then to session hosts. And I'll hit add. And on virtual machines, I will give these a prefix. It will be Azure Virtual Machines. It will need no infrastructure redundancy. And for security type, I'll use standard for now. And then on the image, I'll click to see all images. And on shared images here, you can see all of the custom images that I have. So we also have the demo image that we just now created, but this is in a process of being created. So let us select the image 01, which is one that I created earlier on. And then the VM size, that's fine. We will do 1 VM and select the VNet. And fun thing, here you can see the temporary VNet that was created for my custom image template. So that's also kind of neat. So I'll select a VNet now, or 1 for now. I'll skip the NSGs, select enter ID join, select a username and all that. And then hit review and create, and then create. And this should yield us 1 session host based off of our custom image. And if you remember, this would be with a Norwegian language and the PowerShell installed, the proper one, not the Windows PowerShell. So let's just wait out this deployment and then try and connect to our some new session host. All right, so now we should have a brand new session host created from that custom image with the language change and PowerShell pre-installed. So we should be able to head on over to our remote desktop client and log onto it and see how it works. And I notice immediately that the language has changed. It is now in fact Norwegian. So yeah, and also PowerShell is pre-installed, which is great. This means that our custom image template has done its job and created a brand new custom image with those few little customizations that we had. I did mention that this could be a first step in never patching your session hosts again. So let me quickly tell you how that would work. So if we go back into Azure Virtual Desktop and our custom image templates here, now we are basing our images on the marketplace images, which are maintained and patched each month. So when now a month has passed and you should generally be updating your session host, instead of updating the existing ones, we could create a new image. And the way we would do that is add a custom image template and just call this template 02. And as I said earlier, the import from existing template is now defaultly selected to yes. So we can leave it at that and then browse image templates, and I can select the one that I created earlier and then select. Now all of the settings in this custom image template is inherited from that previous template. So you see the source image is the same, the distribution target is the same. What I can do now is to use the same demo image as a image definition, but I can now set the version to be 1.0.1, for example. This would then mean that whenever you deploy something from that image using the latest, you will now use the 1.01 version, which will be based on the now patched marketplace image, which has the latest patches as of this month. And the rest of the settings are also kept, so I can go ahead and go all the way through and create. And then the process would be the same as before. You would select it and then click start build process, and you would have a new image, and you can now deploy new session hosts based off of that image. So that is how you could use this feature to, not patch your session host again. And the added benefit is that you will always have freshly new installed session hosts. Neat, huh? Now, in this video, I did have a pre-existing AVD setup, so I didn't really cover those bits. I assume that you maybe know all that stuff, but if you don't, I have a video on that showing you how to set up AVD for basic simple scenarios. You might want to watch that next. And like, subscribe, do comment down below if there's any feedback on the video or stuff you want to see from me in future videos. And yeah, cheers.